To everyone who keeps messaging me, asking if the story is true. Please take a look at the nature and description of the subreddit where it was posted. You've probably heard about tours to the Chernobyl exclusion zone. I've been there myself a few times, and it's nothing like the depictions in games or horror films. There are no ghosts, mutants, or strange radioactive anomalies, and you won't find death lurking around every corner. In fact, I believe it's one of the most tranquil and beautiful places on the planet, an example of nature's resilience and its ability to reclaim the damage we've inflicted upon it. So, when my friend Alexei decided to visit, he knew exactly who to call. He's a physics student currently researching nuclear fallout, and he mentioned wanting to take some direct measurements and samples. However, we both knew it was just an excuse to go on an adventure. We explored the old power plant, the abandoned city of Pripyat, and the surrounding exclusion zone. It was a great experience, though I'll spare you the details, since that's not the important part. The interesting part happened while we were driving along some dirt roads in the forest east of Pripyat. That's when we found it. An old rusty fence and a chained gate blocking further passage. A large radiation hazard sign was posted with the words, "Restricted area. Authorized personnel only." Not far beyond the fence, embedded in an artificial-looking hill, were two massive metal blast doors with a large white O13 painted on them and no entry spray-painted over it. "What do you think it is?" Alex asked. "I don't know. Looks like some kind of bunker," I replied. After a closer look, I added, "And it seems like it's been sealed for quite some time." The two halves of the door had been welded together at the center. Alex took some samples and readings, but we were too intrigued to just leave. "Do you think we can get in?" I asked. "Well, definitely not through this entrance. Even if it weren't welded shut, we wouldn't have the means to unlock it," Alex said, studying the door. "This looks like an underground bunker. They must have had a way to pump air inside, and I doubt this is it. There's probably another entrance," I added. We decided to circle the area around the main entrance to look for another way in. It was getting late, and the sky was already dimming. While we searched, a thought occurred to me. Why would they weld the doors shut? What could be so critical inside that they went to such lengths to keep people out? "Hey, look at this," Alex interrupted my thoughts. It was a large concrete block a few meters wide with what appeared to be vents on the sides. When I peered inside, I saw that the vents were also sealed with heavy steel hatches, with no obvious way to open them. However, there was a smaller door nearby, labeled Service Tunnel, and fitted with a large wheel on the outside. "Should I try to open it?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm really curious now. We don't have to go in, but at least we can see if the door still works," Alex said. At first, the wheel wouldn't budge due to rust and dirt, but after some effort, it finally loosened. The door unlocked. It was incredibly heavy, and it took all my strength to pull it open. Behind the door was a small platform and a narrow vertical tunnel with a ladder leading down. What caught my attention was that there was a similar locking mechanism on the inside of the door. They could lock it from both sides. But why? We were lucky that it hadn't been locked from the inside, or we wouldn't have been able to get in. I stepped inside and shined my phone's flashlight down the shaft. It wasn't powerful enough to illuminate the bottom. The air inside was damp and old, carrying a faint, chemical-like odor that I couldn't quite place. There were no signs of radiation or any other hazards. "You've got to be kidding me. This is amazing. We have to come back and explore this," Alex said, excitement evident in his voice. I couldn't have agreed more. By then it was nearly dark, so we sealed the door and called it a day. But we promised each other we'd return. Once I got home, I tried researching the site, but had no luck finding any information. I even reached out to Pavel, a friend who knew the area better than I did. He's actually the one who first took me there. Unfortunately, he couldn't help either, though he promised to ask around. I told him about our plan to return and invited him to join us, but he was out of the country at the time. A week later, we packed up our gear and headed back. This time, we brought rope, heavy-duty flashlights, glow sticks, Geiger counters, waterproof protective clothing, an oxygen meter, and even a small emergency scuba tank, just in case. And don't worry, we weren't reckless. We made sure to let our relatives and friends know about our trip and when we expected to return. We shut the door behind us as we descended into the access shaft. We had no idea what lay ahead and didn't want to risk causing a radiation leak or anything similar. Eventually, we dropped into a concrete tunnel that housed air vents and smaller pipes. There was no power, and therefore no lighting, but luckily we had brought our own. Following the tunnel, we reached another door, this time a regular one, not the heavy bunker-style type. We pushed through and entered a room containing 4 large air pumps, alongside some electrical equipment and controls. The ventilation shafts split into 2 larger ones that tunneled deeper underground, and 2 smaller ones that extended across the room toward another set of doors. Beyond those doors was a large hall cluttered with boxes, crates, and various cargo left scattered about. A security checkpoint stood in one corner, and right behind it, we saw the main door, the same one we had spotted from the outside. Near it, some heavy lifting equipment stood unused. We retraced our steps back through the checkpoint and examined a set of elevators. A simple facility map was mounted on the wall, showing the layout floor by floor. We were on floor 0, the main entry hall, and there were 4 more levels below us. Floor -1, offices, security, and recreation. Floor -2, secure laboratories. Floor -3, accelerator, clean room, decontamination chamber. Floor -4, experiment site. The map was labeled Object 13. This wasn't a military bunker, it was a research facility. Since the elevators were powerless, we took the stairs. As we descended, a creeping thought settled in my mind. They had clearly been moving supplies, but then left everything behind, even dragging equipment toward the main door. Were they trying to escape? Suddenly, I stepped on something that rolled under my foot. I lost my balance and fell, landing on my back. Fortunately, my pack cushioned the fall. I looked down to see what had caused my slip. Empty bullet casings. That uneasy feeling had been building, and now it was stronger. When we reached level -1, I noticed every single door was open. Every one of them. The floor started with a long corridor, flanked by a canteen and kitchen. Various offices lined the hall, filled with old paperwork, computers, and personal belongings, all left right where they'd been. It looked like people had left in a hurry. "Dimitri," Alex called from the canteen on the opposite side of the corridor. "What?" I asked, making my way over. Food was still neatly arranged on the tables. It wasn't fresh, but it also wasn't rotting. Not at all what you'd expect from something left for over 30 years. "How is this even possible?" I asked. "I have no idea. Maybe it got irradiated somehow, but it's not radioactive anymore. I checked." "This doesn't make any sense," Alex said, just as confused as I was. Looking back, I wish we had turned around then and there. The warning signs were all around us, but in the moment, curiosity and excitement kept us going, even as my initial thrill began to give way to a growing sense of unease. We continued on, descending to level -2. The stairwell ended here, so to reach deeper levels, we had to traverse the entire floor to find another stairwell on the opposite side. A security checkpoint and a large blast door stood in our way before we could access the labs. Just like the rest of the facility, every door was wide open. But unlike the tidy rooms on level -1, this floor was a disaster. Equipment was scattered everywhere, making the place look like a maze of disarray. Occasionally, we found more bullet casings littering the ground. Near the far end of the floor, we came across the head scientist's office. The rest of the floor was chaotic, but on the desk, we found a logbook, its pages mostly torn out. Only a few entries remained. October 5th, 1984. Today, we successfully translocated several atoms without altering any physical properties. We still have a long way to go before we can transport solid objects, but this is promising progress. January 17th, 1985. We managed to transport an apple today. I noticed the pattern on the skin was slightly different than before, but it was still the same apple, same structure, same shape. We also transported some electronics, which came through undamaged and fully functional. There's still so much to perfect, but we can't afford to slow down now. The country is depending on us. I read the entries aloud to Alex. We both stood in silence, realizing this place had been more than just a research site. Whatever they had been working on, it was far more advanced than we could have imagined. February 21st, 1985. After completing trials on animals, we successfully translocated our first human today. He is alive and well, a brave hero for our nation. We've now demonstrated that the technology works, though its current practicality is limited due to the fixed translocation ratio. We can't send matter, only exchange the locations of two equally massive objects. I've proposed a new device that could potentially allow for one-way translocation of a single object, but it would require an immense amount of energy. May 1st, 1985. My proposal was accepted by our superiors. They're planning to construct a much larger translocator at the power plant so that we can directly harness the energy of a nuclear reactor. There's something else. We've translocated dozens of test subjects now, all of whom are physically fine. However, some exhibit strange behavior. They sometimes recall historical events differently, or speak of knowing people who don't exist, or worse, people they shouldn't know. A note scribbled in pencil reads, "Test subject 28 was speaking an unknown language and couldn't comprehend any real language after the experiment." Many pages were missing after this. April 25th, 1986. We're changing our approach. After over a year of work, we still haven't resolved the translocation symmetry anomaly. We don't even understand its cause. Continuing down this path feels futile, so today we'll attempt to access the conduit reality instead. Even though Unit 2, the one built in the power plant, is still new, we're going to use it for this experiment. Who knows what wonders we might find on the other side. The final page in the logbook contained a single phrase, repeated over and over. We let them in. "Alex, I think we should go," I called. "Man, come check this out," he replied. I left the lab and stepped into the hallway. Clothes littered the corridor, what remained of them at least, torn to shreds. No bodies, no blood, just strips of fabric, the occasional shoe or watch. I stared into the darkened hallway ahead, frozen for a moment. It was as if something had torn through these people, leaving only their clothes behind. No organic material, just remnants. A wave of dread hit me, so powerful I couldn't move. I didn't even dare to breathe. "Let's get out of here," Alex urged. We turned and walked away. Slowly at first, but soon our pace quickened. Our footsteps echoed through the underground complex. "I just want to leave, man. We shouldn't have done this," Alex muttered. I hadn't told him about the logbook, but before I could say anything, a sudden realization stopped me cold. His voice hadn't echoed, just our footsteps. Alex seemed to notice too, and we both froze, listening. There was nothing, just silence. I took a step forward. Clack. Another step. Clack. Ahead of us was a door. I forced myself to try something. We passed through and I closed it behind us, balancing a glass beaker I found on the floor on top of it. I took a step forward. Silence. It was just the echo, I reassured myself. We moved on, carefully at first, but soon our pace quickened again. We turned the corner when... Crash. The glass shattered. Someone, or something, had opened the door. We dropped everything but our lights and ran. I didn't even know I could run so fast. I always tried to act tough, but I had never been so terrified in my life. Our footsteps stopped echoing, or rather, they no longer matched ours. Something was running behind us, getting closer with each passing second. We reached the security checkpoint and immediately began closing the door. The rusty hinges squealed, but we pulled with all our might. Just as we were about to lock it, a guttural, unnatural growl echoed from behind. The door slammed shut, and I twisted the wheel into the locked position. My heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. Wait. No. It wasn't my heart. It was the thing, pounding on the blast door. We bolted again, sprinting up the stairs, taking them 2 or 3 at a time. Finally, we reached the air pump room. We were exhausted, and even though fear still gripped me, I felt like I'd pass out if I took another step. But at least we'd locked it down below. Alex collapsed against one of the large vertical vents with a heavy bang, 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 bang. Oh no. We'd locked it down there. But we forgot about the vents. Alex and I exchanged a look, our eyes locking in a moment of shared terror. Then, in an instant, the vent exploded, and he was gone. His scream echoed through the air as something dragged him back down. I felt a surge of guilt, but my body acted on instinct. I ran. I climbed the service shaft and slammed the door shut behind me once I was finally out of that nightmare. As soon as my phone regained service, it buzzed non-stop with missed calls and messages from Pavel. Dmitri, I've found someone who knows about O13. Call me back as soon as possible. He says it's dangerous and you need to stay away. Another message. He's calling again. This guy seems serious. You need to contact me right away. And then, I don't know what's happening, but he's heading there. Please, I hope you get this before you go down. Stay safe, my friend. Among all these, one text stood out. A message from an unknown number. Dmitri, this is Anatoly Moroz. I know what you've discovered, and I'm on my way from Kiev. Do not go down there. If you already have, and if you've managed to get out, lock the door you used and make sure it stays locked. I will call you when I arrive. Now here I am, writing this down while I wait. I feel compelled to document everything, just in case I don't make it long enough to warn anyone else in person. But I can't just leave Alex behind. I have to go back. Damn, kids, what does the sign at the fence say? No entry. What's scrawled across the main door? Moroz pointed to the graffiti. No fucking entry. You think we post these signs because we have nothing better to do? Nothing but deal with snoopy college kids who have no idea what they're messing with? He sighed, visibly frustrated. Now look at this mess. Look at what your bright idea got you, he shouted after I finished explaining. The first thing he did when he arrived was run straight to the service tunnel and ensure it was locked tight. He didn't speak to me until he confirmed it was sealed. He was an unremarkable man, mid-50s perhaps, though he looked older than that. What is this place? I asked. You have no idea, he muttered as he walked to his car. What are you doing? I called after him. I'm going to save your friend, and you're coming with me. He handed me a small, retractable winch. You'll be tethered to me by this line. Do everything I say, nothing else. Stay quiet. And don't exhaust yourself. The air down there isn't circulating, and you'll burn through all the oxygen if you aren't careful. He reached into his trunk and pulled out a shotgun. I hesitated. Are those really going to help? To some extent, but don't use it unless I tell you to. He handed me a pistol. And one last thing. Do you know how ozone smells? I nodded. Good. If you smell it, run. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the worst decision of my life when he locked the service door from the inside with a heavy padlock. He caught me watching and said, "This is the only way to keep them from getting out." Yeah, definitely a bad idea. Am I not getting a key? I asked as he clicked the lock shut. Sorry, I only have one. But don't worry, I'll be right here. He tugged the tether, showing the line that connected us. As we walked through the service tunnel, the tether reeled in and out between us, creating a strange rhythm that almost comforted me. It meant I wouldn't get separated, at least. The diesel fuel sloshing in the large canisters we carried added to the bizarre soundtrack of our march. Our first stop was the generator room, located on the other side of the main entry hall. The generator rattled as it began to spin up, breaking the heavy silence. Did you see it? Moroz asked. See what? We've got some time while the generator gets going. Did you get a good look at what took your friend? No, I replied. I couldn't help myself. I asked again. What is this place? Moroz stared off into the distance for a moment before answering. It started as a military stockpile in the 1950s. In the late 70s, they repurposed it into a research site. Anything too dangerous or bizarre for the public eye, they did it here. And some of it was really messed up. Then they started this project on teleportation. They even rebuilt half the facility for it. And that's when everything went to hell. How do you know all this? I asked, feeling a chill. I used to work here, he said simply. I swallowed. So, what are these things? He hesitated, glancing around the dim room. They are... I don't know, he admitted. I was just an assistant. Is there anyone who does know? Moroz looked grim. Not anymore. Anyone who knew, well, let's just say they never left. And how did you get out? The engine clutch engaged with a sharp click, and the generator finally rumbled to life. I didn't make it out, Moraz muttered, avoiding my gaze. I took a sick day when it all went down. The lights flickered on briefly before a circuit breaker popped, plunging us back into darkness. That's fine, he said, unfazed. We can't afford to waste power on lights. We'll need it elsewhere. You'll see. Whatever had happened here, whatever wiped out everyone below ground and somehow tied into the Chernobyl disaster, Moraz hadn't been here. He'd taken a sick day. A sick day. Come on, kid, let's move. We reached the security checkpoint, the one Alex and I had closed in our frantic escape. Remember, stay quiet now, Moraz instructed as we slowly pried the blast door open. Suddenly, light pierced the darkness, momentarily blinding me. I stumbled back, squinting as my eyes adjusted, until I spotted the source. Alex's flashlight, still shining where we had left it. I moved to grab it, but Moraz stopped me, placing a firm hand on my chest and motioning toward the dark corridor ahead. We stood in silence, straining our ears. Then, I heard it. Something distant but unmistakable. Moraz immediately killed his headlamp and gestured for me to do the same. We crouched in the shadows, the only light still emanating from Alex's forgotten flashlight. Moraz cursed under his breath, snatching the flashlight and plunging us into complete darkness. People say when you're under stress, your senses sharpen to compensate for what you lose. Maybe that's true, or maybe it was just the thing getting closer. Either way, I could hear everything. The wet, muffled splat as something heavy hit the ground. The slow, irregular footsteps that followed, more like bare flesh on concrete than the solid clack of shoes. Each step came closer. I gripped the gun Moraz had given me, praying I wouldn't need to use it. The thing's raspy, labored breathing filled the air now, close enough that I could almost feel its icy exhale against my skin. Then, with a sudden crash, something slammed into a wall farther down the way we'd come, shattering glass and plastic. The thing turned and hurried toward the noise. For a moment, I thought it was over, that we were safe. But then, out of nowhere, a hand brushed against me. I nearly screamed, but the hand clamped over my mouth, silencing me. Another hand swiftly took my gun. It's me. Follow, and move slowly, Moraz whispered in my ear. We crept into a side room, and I heard the door close softly behind us. We waited in the darkness for a few agonizing moments before switching our lights back on. Fuck, don't ever do that again, I snapped at him, still shaking. But Moraz wasn't listening. He was fixated on something. Thick, black droplets staining the floor on the far side of the room. What? What is that? I asked, my voice trembling. Blood, he replied grimly. At least it was. We followed the dark trail through several rooms, finally stopping in a large chemical lab. Something lay on the ground, submerged in a puddle of the black liquid. Alex's knife. There was fresh red blood, too, a small trail of droplets leading in the opposite direction of the black stain. Look, he must have gotten away, I whispered urgently. I doubt it, Moraz said flatly. If we want to find him, we need to go to level -4. He barely glanced at the knife before turning away, like it didn't matter. But this is his knife, I protested, pointing at the trail of blood. They fought here, and he went that way. He's hurt, but he's alive. That's all the more reason not to waste time. Let's go, Moraz insisted, already stepping back into the main corridor. I didn't want to follow. I wanted to search for Alex. But the tether connecting us made it impossible, so I reluctantly followed. At first, Moraz, tell me what's going on. How do you know he's not here? Because I know, he snapped. Just shut up. We don't have time for this. We weren't whispering anymore. I'm not taking another step until you explain how you're so sure, I demanded, my frustration boiling over. Because he's dead, Moraz yelled, his voice echoing through the dark hallway. What? But you said, forget what I said. We need to get down to level -4 now. Something snapped inside me. I'd trusted him, because he was the only one who seemed to know what was happening, the only one who could help me save Alex. But now it was clear. We weren't here to save anyone. Moraz wasn't just an assistant, and I'd been blind to it all along. I began unbuckling my end of the tether. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted, his voice rising in alarm. "I'm leaving. Give me the key to the padlock." "Number, I can't do that," he replied, his agitation evident. I had no choice. I raised the gun, pointing it at him. "Give me the key," I demanded, my voice steady. "You really think I'd give you a working gun?" Moraz sneered, raising his shotgun and pointing it directly at me. "You're not going anywhere." I pulled the trigger on my pistol, but all I heard was a hollow click. Nothing. Damn it. Why are we here? Why didn't you call for backup or let your superiors handle this? Why are you holding me at gunpoint? I demanded, my voice shaking with fear and frustration. "Let's just say our goals don't align anymore," he replied coldly. "But don't worry, not with guns though. With concrete, they're going to seal this place shut for good. And if we want to be out before that happens, we need to move quickly." "Why won't you just let me go now?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. "Because it's a two-man job," he said, staring me down. "There are things more important than you, me, or your friend." I couldn't argue with that. Maybe he was right, but I still didn't understand any of this. I didn't want to. I just wanted out. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice thick with desperation. But before he could answer, I saw something. Movement behind him. It crept silently along the ceiling. I froze, my eyes widening in horror. It was the creature. Crawling towards us, its body twisted and grotesque, vaguely human in shape but distorted beyond recognition. Its pale skin was stretched tight over its skeletal frame, black veins pulsing beneath the surface. There was no hair, and its face was a nightmare, just empty holes where its nose and ears should have been, its bloodshot eyes locked in a lifeless stare. We had escaped it before, but now, our arguing had drawn it back, and there was no time left to run. Moraz noticed my change in expression and began to turn, but it was too late. The creature lunged, just as he fired his shotgun. The deafening blast echoed through the tight space, momentarily blinding me with the muzzle flash. But the shot missed, and the thing crashed into Moraz, knocking him to the ground. Ears ringing, vision blurred, I instinctively tried to run, forgetting that I was still tethered to Moraz. The line reached its limit, stopping me abruptly, and I fell hard to the floor. My head snapped back, and I turned just in time to see the creature shifting its focus to me. Moraz lay still on the ground, dazed. I must have yanked it off him when I fell, but now it was coming for me. Frantically, I fumbled with the tether, managing to disconnect it just in time. I hurled the useless pistol at the creature, hitting it squarely in the head. It stumbled, giving me just enough time to scramble to my feet and run. My mind raced, and the only place I could think to go was the storage room adjacent to the chemical lab. I slammed the door shut and shoved a heavy shelf against it, barricading myself inside. The creature clawed at the door for what felt like an eternity, its heavy breathing and erratic movements just inches away. I sat there in the dark, pressed against the cold wall, paralyzed by fear. But eventually, the scratching stopped. I heard it leave, presumably to finish off Moraz. I didn't know how much time passed. I just sat there, too terrified to do anything, my heart pounding in the silence. It was getting harder to breathe. I started to wonder if maybe this was it. Maybe I should just stay here and let it end quietly, rather than face whatever horrors were waiting on the other side of the door. Then, I heard a voice. Faint at first, but unmistakable. "Dimitri, it's me, Alex." My heart skipped a beat. "Alex, is that really you?" I called out, hope flickering inside me. "Yeah, thank God, I thought I was dead. You came back." Alex's voice was muffled but clear. "Come on, we need to get out of here." I stood up, moving toward the door, but something stopped me. I hesitated, hand hovering over the barricade. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I was hiding too, but then I heard the gunshot. I came looking for you." "Dimitri, we have to go. Open the door," he urged, his voice full of urgency. I froze. Was it really him? My mind raced. Moraz had said Alex was dead, and I'd seen the blood. Could it really be him? No! Moraz said you were dead. I saw your blood, Alex. It can't be you, I shouted, backing away from the door. What are you talking about? One of those things got me, yeah, but I'm still here. I'm hurt, but I'm alive, Dimitri. Please just open the door, he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. I sat down again, my thoughts spinning. Could it really be him? And then he said something that stopped me cold. Dimitri, do you remember the cherry tree I knew you'd come back? The cherry tree. Our childhood. We used to climb it all the time, daring each other to go higher. One day I pushed it too far. I dared Alex to climb higher than me, and he did, until the branch snapped beneath him. He fell, breaking his leg. I had nearly gotten him killed over a stupid bet. No one else knew that story. No one but Alex. It had to be him. I opened the door, and there he was. He looked terrible. Bruises, scrapes, and a bloodied piece of torn shirt wrapped around his hand. But it was him. Are you okay? I asked, my voice shaking. I've been better, he replied with a weak smile. Let's just get out of here. It's not going to be that easy, I said quietly, glancing down the dark corridor. We weren't safe. Not yet. I told Alex everything that had happened, about Moraz, the locked door, and the fact that only Moraz had the key. He was either dead or gone, and we were trapped. There were tools and supplies upstairs, right? Maybe we can find something to cut through the chain, Alex suggested. It was better than searching for Moraz's key in this nightmare. We quickly found his shotgun, stained with a mixture of his blood and the creature's, and immediately felt a bit safer. Our packs, which we'd dropped earlier, were still there, untouched. With cautious steps, we made our way back to the main hall, but the entire time, I couldn't shake the eerie sensation of being watched. Near the main door, we found some old saws and files. We grabbed whatever looked useful. But before we could even get started, the inhabitants of this place made their move. One of the thin, grotesque creatures crawled out of the stairwell. I aimed and fired the shotgun. It fell from the ceiling, twitching like an insect in its death throes. But then, another one emerged, and another. Soon, they were pouring out, too many to fight. We bolted for the air pump room, slamming the door shut and jamming a large saw between the handles to block it. We worked quickly, knowing it was only a matter of time before the creatures would break through. Or worse, come in through the vents. Alex, with his injured hand, couldn't use the shotgun, so he took on the task of cutting the chain while I stood guard, ready to shoot anything that came out of the vents. But the cutting was slow. Way too slow. Alex barely made progress, and I could already hear the creatures pounding on the door, slamming against it with a force that made the metal rattle on its hinges. Any moment, they would get through. And then they stopped. I coughed as a sharp, acrid odor hit my nose. What the hell is that? Alex asked. Ozone, I muttered, my heart sinking. Wait, what? Moraz told me about this, I said, panic rising in my voice. He said if I ever smelled ozone, I should run. As if on cue, the door shook with a thunderous slam, sending dust into the air and bending the metal outward. Whatever was on the other side was far worse than the creatures we had encountered. And it was coming. There's nowhere to run, I cried out. The heavy steel door was on one side, and something monstrous was breaking through on the other. But Alex, thinking fast, asked, Do you still have the rope? Without hesitation, we tied it around one of the pumps. My hands were trembling so badly that it took longer than it should have. But when the door slammed again, I knew I had to focus. One of the bolts flew off the door and clattered across the room. A cold chill shot down my spine, and suddenly, nothing mattered except tying that knot. Once secured, we dropped the rope down the broken vent, the same one Alex had been dragged into earlier. We climbed inside and started sliding down. Just as I heard the door burst open, I lost my grip and fell several meters, landing hard on top of another vent. It gave way beneath me, and I crashed into a corridor below. Moments later, Alex landed on top of me. Groaning in pain, we got to our feet and scanned the area. Ahead of us was an orange door labeled Decontamination. There was no handle, just a button on the wall next to it. I pressed it, and after a few tense seconds, the door hissed open, revealing a small room with a control panel. We stepped inside, and the door closed behind us. Jets of air blasted us from all sides, and then a green light appeared. Another door in front of us opened, inviting us deeper into the facility. As I looked at the control panel, I noticed a fresh smudge of blood. Could Moroz still be alive? Did he pass through here? We had no choice but to move forward. There was no going back now. We were descending deeper into the heart of this twisted place. The decontamination room was supposed to be sterile, but like the upper levels, it had been wrecked. Equipment was broken, walls scratched, and debris littered the floor. After some searching, we stumbled upon a makeshift infirmary. Dozens of beds were lined up, separated by flimsy plastic curtains. Medical equipment was scattered around, some still attached to clipboards at the ends of beds. I picked up one of the clipboards. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Patient 2. Quarantine. Survey Team C, patient in coma. Observation only. Deceased, 0728. Unknown cause. I flipped to the next clipboard. Patient 6. Quarantine. Survey Team C, patient in coma. Observation only. Deceased, 752. Unknown cause. The final clipboard I picked up told a different, more disturbing story. Patient 19. Quarantine. On-site operative assistant, first contact with Survey Team C. Massive blunt force trauma. Chest, suspected internal damage. Cranial concussion. Suspected damage to cervical spine. Dislocated L shoulder. Fracture. L humerus. Multiple lacerations. Chest. Deceased, 404. Internal hemorrhage. I glanced at Alex, who looked as unnerved as I felt. The deeper we went, the worse this place became. I don't like this, Alex muttered. We need to find a way out of here. Fast. Patient 7. Quarantine. Survey Team C. Patient is psychotic and unresponsive. Mild to moderate frostbite. Observation only. Termination order. Signed, A. Moroz. There were empty body bags on the other side of the room, adding to the sense of dread that was slowly suffocating me. We searched the area, going deeper and deeper into the lower levels of the facility. The air grew thick with the stench of rot. Eventually, we stepped into a room that stopped us in our tracks. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in a grotesque, fleshy substance. Tendrils or veins stretched across every surface, like something straight out of a Dead Space nightmare. And attached to it were bodies, dozens of them, shriveled up like insects caught in a spider's web, their skin pulled taut over their skeletal remains. I think we should go back, Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper, anxiety dripping from every word. I agreed and we turned to leave, but as we retraced our steps, I heard the distinct sound of debris shifting in the corridor we had just come from. Suddenly, one of those creatures crawled into the light of my flashlight. It stood there for a moment, its blank, bloodshot eyes locked on us. Then it lunged. I fired the shotgun, and it collapsed, twitching as its lifeless body hit the ground. An empty shotgun shell clattered to the floor beside it. But I heard more of them. They were coming. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted deeper into the facility, the creatures scuttling along the walls behind us. I managed to shoot a few more, but soon enough, I ran out of ammo. We reached a long, dark tunnel, partially submerged in knee-deep water. The creatures were almost on us, but as we entered the tunnel, I noticed something strange. They stopped. They wouldn't follow us into the water. We pressed on, trudging through the freezing water for what felt like hours. The cold seeped into my bones, but it was better than whatever was waiting for us back there. Alex, however, was deteriorating quickly. He had been looking worse since I'd found him, but now his skin was pale, and he complained about a severe headache and dizziness. Eventually, he collapsed. I tried to wake him, but he was unconscious. I had no choice but to drag him through the water, struggling to keep moving. As we continued, I started hearing something. A splash, far off at first, but growing closer. I turned, shining my light into the black tunnel behind us. Nothing. I kept moving, but the sound persisted. Another splash. It wasn't getting closer or farther away. It was just there, echoing through the tunnel. I quickened my pace, dragging Alex as fast as I could manage, but it was exhausting. Eventually, we reached the end of the tunnel. A massive steel door blocked our way, and there was no visible way to open it. My heart sank. It was a dead end. I stopped, listening to the sound behind me. It wasn't just splashing anymore. It sounded like someone, was wading through the water. Panic surged through me, and I began banging on the steel door, calling for help. The sounds were getting closer. I could see ripples in the water now, the unseen presence approaching. I turned, heart pounding, staring into the dark tunnel. Nothing. Silence. Then that familiar, sharp scent hit me. Ozone. I froze. Suddenly, the steel door behind me groaned as it shifted. Metal scraped against metal, and the door slowly opened. "Dmitri!" A voice called out. It was Moraz. "What the? Who is?" "Oh no, you brought it here," Moraz snapped, pulling both me and Alex through the door and slamming it shut behind us. He glanced down at Alex, still unconscious on the floor. "That's your friend? What happened to him?" "I don't know. Are you okay?" I asked, noticing the large gash across his face and the damaged right eye. "No thanks to you," he muttered. He noticed the makeshift bandage on Alex's arm and unwrapped it, revealing a gruesome bite mark. "That," Moraz said, pointing to the bite. "Stand back." He stood up and drew his pistol. "No, wait," I shouted, panic rising. "At least tell me what's going on." "He's going to die in a few minutes," Moraz replied coldly. "This will make it easier. For him. But mostly for us." "What?" "No. Please, there has to be another way," I pleaded. Moraz hesitated, looking from me to Alex. Then, to my relief, he holstered the gun. "All right, this might help," he said, rummaging through his pack. He pulled out a syringe half filled with a clear liquid and injected Alex. "It won't matter, though," he said, almost under his breath. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused and scared. "Follow me," Moraz ordered, standing up. "Take him with you if you want, but I'm not carrying him." As we moved through the facility, Moraz started to explain. "I guess you've figured out by now that this has something to do with the disaster 30 years ago." I nodded, though I still didn't fully understand. There was an experiment here, teleportation. They thought they could move matter instantly. They succeeded, but they opened something they couldn't close. "What do you mean?" I asked. "They weren't just moving matter. They were tearing holes in reality, and something came through." He paused, glancing at Alex. "These creatures, they're not from here." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. "Is that why you were here? To stop it?" "Partially. But it's too late for that. The damage is done. Now we just need to make sure it doesn't get worse." We continued walking in silence, my mind racing. What had we gotten ourselves into? The first machine we used for the teleportation experiment simply wasn't strong or reliable enough. We quickly realized that the process was far more complex than we initially thought. We weren't just sending objects from one place to another. We were transferring them across multiple parallel realities. However, there was a limitation. We could only swap 2 objects of equal mass between identical locations in 2 different realities. So, they built a new machine, powered by a nuclear reactor, hoping it could allow us to move anything to any location between 2 given realities. We began exploring entirely new universes, witnessing worlds where the Germans won World War II, worlds where humanity had annihilated itself, and even worlds where life never evolved on Earth. But then, someone came up with an idea. If there are parallel universes, what exists between them? There was only one way to find out, and that's when everything went wrong, just like I said. We should have been satisfied with what we had. But we always crave more, don't we? They attempted to access this conduit reality, as it was called. When they activated the machine, it stayed open. Something happened, and a portal formed, sustaining itself independently of our equipment. We sent in a survey team. They came back after a few minutes, reporting bizarre phenomena, a strange, unsettling feeling in that space, the sensation that time and space were distorted, and some even claimed they saw themselves in multiple locations at once. No amount of threats could convince them to return. A second team was sent in later. They never came back. Then a third team was dispatched to find them. They did return, but something was horribly wrong with them. It was as if their minds had been wiped clean. I couldn't shake the image of those blank stares we had seen on the creatures we fought. Shortly after their return, a massive surge of energy erupted from the portal, shooting straight into the reactor. But that wasn't the end of it. "And you know all this because you just happened to take a sick day, right?" I asked. I was in another part of the facility when it happened. I'll never forget when they told me something had come through, into our world. "What was it?" I asked. "I don't know. No one does. It was unlike anything we've ever encountered. It didn't just kill nearly everyone here. It did things to them. You've seen it. We're here." We stepped into a control room packed with computers, various controls and displays. Miraz shut another blast door behind us and sealed the control room. "We need to close the portal. We've tried before, but these things won't let us." "So, where are they now?" I asked. "The moment I heard you entered the facility and made it back, I knew something was off. This place used to be crawling with them. At least one is still around. You can smell the ozone. Years ago, anyone who went in didn't make it past level -1 alive. But we've come this far, and I have no idea why. That's what scares me. Something's wrong. I know I'm asking a lot, but we have to go through the portal and use this." He pulled a crude-looking device from his backpack, a jumble of wires, coils, and odd parts hanging off it. "We need to place one end of this in the other reality and bring the other end back to our world. If it works, the portal might collapse." "And how do you know we won't end up like the third team?" I asked. "That's the thing, I don't. But I'll tell you this. You know that concrete shield they built over the reactor? It wasn't to seal the reactor. It was to seal this place, to stop whatever came into our world from getting out. A few years ago, the worst happened. The shield began cracking. They're trying to escape. They've recently built a new containment building, as you probably know. But how long can this go on? Sooner or later, something will fail and they will get out. This might be our only shot to end it for good." How did I end up in this situation? I wondered. I was just an ordinary guy who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the way Miraz talked, it felt like the fate of the world was resting on me. And maybe he was right. Whatever chain of events led us here, led me here. Maybe it meant that Miraz and I were the only ones who could do what had to be done. "All right, let's do this," I said. We suited up in what looked like modified spacesuits, leaving everything else behind in the control room except for the device, and stepped into the machine. The chamber was dome-shaped, packed with intricate machinery. At the center, a sphere of bright white light glowed. Above it was a dark, hollow shaft, reaching straight up, with cracks and debris scattered around the opening. We tethered ourselves to a steel rail. Miraz walked forward and stepped into the sphere, vanishing instantly. After a moment's hesitation, I followed him in. I found myself in a place beyond words. There was no sense of up or down, and I could move in any direction, though it felt like walking. The space seemed empty, yet I could make out enormous shapes, each surface dotted with billions of tiny shining points. "Here," a voice called out. I searched for Miraz, but he was nowhere to be seen. "Where are you?" I shouted. "Come," he replied, grabbing my arm seemingly from thin air. I glanced around and saw hundreds, maybe thousands, of other white spheres scattered across the void in the distance. "Are those?" I asked. "Yes. Portals to other parallel realities. Are we going to close all of them?" "No," Miraz said firmly. "Just ours. The others aren't our responsibility. They'll have to figure out their own solutions." We made our way toward one distinct shape, though it was just as difficult to describe as everything else here. It was like a fractal, endlessly repeating the same form over and over again. "I think this is it," Miraz said, fiddling with the device. It beeped a few times, then emitted a high-pitched hum. "This isn't good," he muttered. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Listen, you need to take the other end and return. Once you're back, pull this switch and hold the button until the device activates. I have to stay here." I picked up my end of the machine, watching as a wire unfurled between us. "What about the key to the door?" I asked, worried. "There is no key." "What? But that wasn't part of the plan." "This was always the plan. I couldn't risk—" He trailed off. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. "Shit! Don't look at it! Go! Run!" Mraz yelled. I didn't hesitate. I ran, following the wire back to our portal, my eyes half closed. I emerged through the portal and quickly set the device on the ground, flipping the switch. The high-pitched noise started again. I pressed the button, waiting. For a moment, nothing happened, and then, without warning, a deafening whine filled the air, accompanied by a blinding flash and a wave of heat. When it was over, the portal was gone. Severed wires and the tether lay on the floor, where it once stood. Alex had woken up by then, looking much better. I filled him in on what had happened while he was unconscious. We weren't sure what to do next. We considered going back to try cutting the chain on the door again, but after what had happened last time, we doubted it would work. We might not even survive the attempt. Then Alex had an idea. What if we used the machine to teleport ourselves out of here? It took hours to figure out the controls. The machine was heavily damaged, and using the reactor was out of the question, but the backup generators provided just enough power for a simple translocation, as it was described. All we needed was to input a target vector, and that's when we heard it. The familiar clicking sound and the smell of ozone. A powerful slam rocked the room, leaving a dent in the steel door connecting the control room to the rest of the facility. "Not again!" I yelled. "I think I've got it. There are vectors written here. We just need to adjust the height, and we'll end up above ground," Alex explained. "Do it fast," I shouted as the door rattled under another slam. He made some quick adjustments, and the controls lit up, alarms blaring. We sprinted to the core chamber and sealed the door behind us, just as the control room door finally gave way. Standing in the center of the chamber, we waited. Smoke and sparks filled the air as the machine powered up. Please work, I thought. Another loud crash echoed through the chamber as the door was ripped off its hinges. I turned to look, but time seemed to freeze. In that moment, I didn't feel fear. Instead, I felt calm, almost as if I was on the verge of understanding everything. I wanted to stay there, forever. Suddenly, a bright flash blinded me, and I hit my head against something. I opened my eyes and inhaled fresh air. We were lying upside down in a crater-like hole, surrounded by a forest. We had made it out. After a few minutes, we found our car. As we drove away, we saw several military helicopters flying in the opposite direction, heading toward the facility. Alex later checked himself into a hospital with a story about an animal attack. He ended up being fine, and we never spoke of it again. I thought it was over. I believed our world was safe from whatever remained on the other side of the portal. But when I finally got home that day, I noticed something strange. The old cherry tree we used to play under as kids. It wasn't there anymore. In its place, there was an apple tree instead. Today, we successfully transported an apple. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The red and green skin on top had a slightly different pattern. We were transferring objects across multiple, parallel realities. Portals from other parallel realities. Are we going to close them all? No, just ours. The others aren't our responsibility. They'll have to deal with it themselves. I can't help but feel that I didn't return to the reality I knew. When we teleported out, I'm starting to believe we ended up in a different one. And I can't stop thinking about it. The possibility that, in this version of reality, the portal might still be open. I don't think we're safe.